Cindy Lentz interviewing Mrs. Sophia Yurik at her home in West Langley on March 12th.
I'm Mrs. Yurik, and I come from Czechoslovakia in 1920, and I got married in 1922 to Frank Yurik, and I live in a farm 10 years, from 1932 to 42.
What was your impression of your first home in Langley?
Well, there wasn't very fancy houses around here. It was just like shack, and we had no electricity, just artisans well, and we have a very hard times. Everything was not so fancy like now.
And when you came to Langley, were you living with another family?
Yes, we lived two families in one shack. Just was 3 rooms, kitchen and 1 bedroom and a small living room.
Okay. And how many children was there to provide for?
Well, there was 3 was mine, and that another part it has a 2. There was 5 children and 3 adults.
And what was your income for the month?
Oh, sometimes if we get $15, that was good, but sometimes we get 10, sometimes $7 from milk. But we have to buy mash for cows, so we won't grow our grain. We just grow our hay, but not grain.
And where did you get your income from? Your husband or?
My husband, he sent me every 2 months or so, something for us to buy others.
And where was your husband during the years you were out on the farm?
Well, he was working for railway, CPR. He was in Sandon for many years, and then he moved after he moved to Nakusp.
Okay. And I understand your house was a shack.
Yeah, we have just a 3-room house here, yeah.
Your fuel,
well, we have cut some wood in it. We have some 10-acre bush, so we have to go in the bush and cut it.
And your sons help with this, I imagine?
Yes.
And your farm animals, how many did you have?
I have 5 cows and 1 horse and a couple of cows, the calves.
Oh, and if your animals are ever sick, who did you call on?
I called Mr. McLugan, Sam McLugan,
and
our neighbor.
And how did you pay him for the work he did on the animals, if any?
Well, he won't charge. He won't take the $1 for him. Everybody was so good to each other. We was working like one family, around here.
How often did you have to get your main staple foods? And by staple foods I mean like your sugar or flour or coffee.
Well, every week come a red white from Milner, and he order Friday, Friday, and he deliver Saturday.
And the flour, where did you get your flour from him?
Well, I usually get a big amount, 100-pound flours from Barkerfield, where I get in my feed from cows, grain like chop, barley chop, oat chop, and wheat for the chicken, like that. And we get 100-pound flour, so that lasts us for.
And how much was 100 pounds flour?
Oh, about maybe $2.90, $2.95 or $3, something like that.
And how long did the flour last you?
6 weeks. I make my own bread, and we make some homemade noodles and pancakes and like that. For lunches for kids we use lots of bread.
Were some foods hard to get during these years, or?
No, it wasn't hard. Longer. If you had the money, you could get anything. There wasn't a shortage or anything like that. But we didn't have money. That's the.
And I imagine you would have had your own vegetable garden.
Oh yes, we have a big garden. We have carrots and turnips and tomatoes and potatoes and cabbage. All vegetables.
And you had your own orchard?
We have our own orchard. We have a nice King's apples. We have such a good apples. We have until Easter.
Mm. Okay. And the transportation, how did you get about?
Well, we have to walk to the bus, Carl Road that was over a mile to get bus if we have a good neighbor, you know, Mr. Harbin, Mrs. Harbin, or Mr. and Mrs. Rowe. I get, you know, when I have a kid's children sick or something like that, well, they take me in a car. But because I haven't got any car, so...
Do you remember the type of car at all?
Oh, I don't know, maybe Ford.
Okay. How often did you get to church, and did you ever get into town?
Well, I don't go very many because there was no Catholic around here, but there's a mailman, but I forgot his name. I don't think he lives anymore. He was Catholic, and, you know, he offered me, he come and get me in a church, and once in a while he come in and we go to church, to Langley, St. Joseph.
Since there was no man about the house, who usually did your heavy chores, like cutting hay in the summer?
Well, we have a good neighbors, you know, and he helped me. He has a one horse, and I have a one horse, so we make the team. And so he plow his land with the team, and he come help me plow with my land and put the seeds on, or even cut hay or rake. So that was just good neighbors help each other that way.
And did you pay him for the labor?
No, never. It was just...
So he used your horse, and then you used his in return?
Yeah.
How often did you get out for a social visit with your neighbors, or did you ever?
Well, I don't go very much out. I was busy, but their neighbor was very good. They come and see me. So we have a chat, make a cup of tea, and...
And what did the children do for enjoyment? What games do they play? Do you remember any?
Well, I think if I could remember that there has a football or baseball in West Langley. But you see, there was no transportation. There was when I come in here, the kids have to walk. There was no bus for the school. They walk 4 miles to West Langley.
There and back, or just one way?
Both ways, back and forth. So you see, they was pretty tired, and you know, they're leaving quite early in the morning and come home about 4 o'clock.
They did chores around the house, I
imagine.
they
helped, they helped me, you know, with milking cows or get away milk and to see what the milk is, go to milkman.
And how often did your husband come home?
Oh, sometimes he come every once a year, but first time when he was so kind of hard up, he doesn't come for a couple of years. He'll just come for a visit around winter time, if he come.
In case of an accident or whenever any of the children were sick, upon whom did you call?
Well, we have a doctor in Langley, so I have a sick boy. He has a pneumonia, my son, and he called the doctor, and he come and he says, well, if you're looking after, he lived. So my good neighbor, Mrs. McLugan, he stayed with me 24 hours, and she tried to put his temperature down, so he survived. He was okay.
And you never paid her?
No.
You did favors for each other,
yes,
is this the way?
Yeah. And I have another sick boy. He was just about 7 years old, and he got a appendicitis, and he was broken. So we called the doctor, but this time he come in and early in the morning, and he took to hospital all the way to Westminster General Hospital. Mm-hmm.
And how did you get there? By car, I imagine?
Well, the doctor took us, both me and the boy. And I stayed there, and I come back home in a bus from Westminster to Carwood Road. We have to walk 4 miles.
Do you remember how much the bus was? How much it would cost?
Oh God, not very much. Maybe a couple dollars. Yeah, maybe not even that. It was so long I can't even remember.
Do you happen to remember any big social
No, not very many because I have no car and I was just sticking around home. Well, once in a while, if the kids has a Christmas concert or something like that, so a good neighbor took us in a car and so we see the concert, like in a Port Kells or West Langley. It was just once a year, something like that.
And I suppose during the summertime would be when you got most of your Sunday visitors.
Yes, they're coming from Vancouver and Westminster, my sister and my friends.
So what happened during the winter time?
Gosh, you have nothing very much, you just stick home and keep the things going, fire going and
stay warm, I guess.
Warm, yeah, and that's it.
In 1939, did you have a bad winter?
Oh, that was the worst I could remember. There was so much snow, about maybe 4 feet or something, and rain and frost, so the kids can't go to school, and milk truck doesn't even can't come either.
And this milk truck would pick up your milk, I suppose.
Yeah.
And you sold your milk to which company?
I guess it's Fraser Valley Company.
Fraser Valley Milk Producers.
Yeah, milk producers.
And do you remember how much you sold to him? And how much you got in return?
You mean a whole year or?
Well, just say one time, yeah.
Oh.
Say one day.
Oh. How much I milk Cindy?
Yeah.
Well, sometimes the winter time cow doesn't milk very good because you see they don't have a grass, but summertime they milk better. But I was pretty lucky if I shipped a 100 pound. It wasn't very many, but 100 pound there wasn't very much either. It was just $1 for 100 pound because for skin milk you get nothing, and 100 pound they get 4 pound butter fat, and the pound butter fat was 25 cents.
And did you ever sell any of your milk to the local neighbors?
No, just the one neighbor was kind of poor. There wasn't living in a relief, so I sell her 1 quart, and she come and get it, and that was about 2 cents and a half for a quart.
And what do you mean by relief?
Well, they used to call it relief. Like now would be something like any welfare. So the poor people, they don't have nothing, no land, no house, and they have to go on a relief, but men have to go work for, and in a road, slashing bush or fixing the road and like that. I don't know how much they get, but there was a living like that.
Do you remember any of the other prices of the foods in the 30s that you had to pay? Like how much was, say, potatoes or eggs?
Oh my, that was very cheap. That was 25 cents for a sack of potatoes. Because you see, poor farmers, I guess they don't, everybody has it, and if you want to sell it to go to the market in some place like in the Westminster, well, it wasn't even worth it. But anyway, it was hard to even sell it for 25 cents.
But did you, I guess you never had to buy them since you probably had your own,
no,
right?
no, we have them all, and we needed them. Of course, it wasn't wasted, but I could sell it, but I mean, nobody
would buy it?
No.
And your eggs?
Oh, eggs, I have not very many chicken, about maybe half a dozen and a half or something like that, but eggs was very cheap, 10 cents a dozen if you want to.
And do you remember any other foods? Like, say, candies, I guess the kids didn't get them very often.
Oh, gosh, I never have a candy for the kids because, they have the apples I couldn't afford it to buy even oranges.
What about the dentist? Now, how often would they see that, just thinking of candies? It was good they didn't have candies, I guess.
No, that's it. I don't think I can remember the kids wasn't any dentist. Oh, I guess they get maybe in a school.
Oh, check up.
Check up, yeah.
Oh. Do you remember any of the clothing styles in the 1930s at all?
Well, there was long dresses and no jeans like that, but there was a pretty fair costume, long skirt.
What about for dress up or for the evening out? I guess you never went out that.
Well, I never go out. I don't know, but I think there was wearing long, not into the knees, but I mean, not too long, but just.
What do the boys wear, dearie?
Well, they don't wear long hair. It's one thing, and they have a pretty good overalls, like or really.
Like they're wearing now, or
yeah,
the style now?
Oh no, that was different in the Canada.
You mentioned long hair. The boys with what type of styles? Hairstyles? Crew cuts or?
Short, very short, Well, my boys doesn't go on any barber anyway. We couldn't afford it. And my neighbor cut my boy's hair.
And your daughter, how did she wear her hair?
Well, I guess they have long hair too. And she has a nice blonde hair, but I don't think they don't cut her girl's hair.
Did she curl it, or was it natural?
No, she has a little bit natural, but if they wanted, they could curl it.
And what method did they use? How did they curl the hair?
Oh, I think they used to have an old-fashioned way. Even in fact, I use it, but I can't explain to you that it was just like a fork, and you stick it in a stove or in a coal lamp, and you get it hot, and then you try it in a paper, so if they burn paper, that's too hot for the hair. So that's a really old-fashioned way. That's why we get a little bit of wave in the top of a head,
And okay, and to communicate with say with town and to know the new styles, did you read the papers or?
Gosh, no, I never have a paper.
You never had no papers?
No, I never had.
So you weren't too concerned with what was going on in other places?
No, I don't know very much news what's going on, and I don't know. Because we have we have a radio later on, and it was, but it was.
When you did get the radios towards the end of the 30s, what programs did you listen to?
Well, CJOR, that was very, very important, and the kids very, and I was appreciated too, but I don't have very much time to listen, but the kids enjoyed very much. I think they have call it gangster Buckster or something like that. That's kind of crime, shooting, tooting, I guess that's what kids used to go in a neighborhood, and then when he got a radio, so there was always very fun of that.
So by this time you must have had electricity.
Oh yes, yes, we had when you get a little bit better standing in the field, well, we put electricity, so we had in a house and in a barn and a yard too. It was sure, we thought we were luxury when we had electricity.
Did you have a phone by then? Or
no,
did you never
we never have a phone, no.
No. What was a typical day on the farm during harvest time, Mrs. Yurik?
Harvest time? Well, that was just like weather, when sometimes we cut hay down and then when it was raining, and sometimes get a little bit better, we put in hay in a stag and then start the rain and we have to spread it again. That was double work. So we was worried about the weather most of it.
your hay wasn't in bales, it was just pitchforked
No,
into
no, there was loose,
stacks.
and we hauling in a barn in a wagon and put them in a barn like that. Everything by hand. There's no machinery like that.
What time do you usually get up? Were you up in the morning and in bed at night?
6 o'clock in the morning I get up, feed the cows, and then come house and then again prepare for the milk and go back in the barn again. And that was quite early. And then evening, sometimes we have to go certain hours, 30 hours in the morning milking and 30 hours in the evening.
What hours were those? Like
about 6 o'clock.
6
6 o'clock, yeah, or 6:30, something like that.
Do you happen to remember anything political during your years on the farm?
No, I just can't, because I don't have a paper. We have no radio or any television those days. We don't communicate with nothing very much. I was just occupied with my own problems and my own work and the family.
So then you weren't concerned with what was happening in the outside world?
No.
It was just a struggle to survive on the farm.
Yes, that's it.
During your 10 years on the farm, I imagine there was some difficult times, but I imagine there just has to be some happy times too, doesn't there?
Oh yes, I was young and I was able to work hard. I used to have big gardens and everything by hand, and I was happy. People was very honest around here. They help each other anywhere they can, in a sickness or any troubles you have. There was everybody pitch in and help each other.
Although there was a depression in the 30s, I imagine it seems to sound that you didn't starve to death, or you managed to get through it.
Oh yes, we wasn't starving. We have we don't have a fancy food, but we have plenty milk and homemade bread and our own fruit and eggs and chicken, and we killed a pig or two in a year. So that was lots of people was worse than we are. We have a home and we have a place to sleep and live on. And lots of people unfortunately don't have any that.
Can you recall any neighbors who were less fortunate than you?
Oh, well, I could remember Mrs. Anders, and of course I don't go very many, Mrs. Johnson.
They were to the point where they were starving?
Yeah, well, I don't think so. There was you call it relief, but I don't know, there wasn't very much. But the relief, I don't know how many dollars we get.
10 to 12 a month.
Yeah, something like that. But you see, if they got it well careful, they bought it cheap stuff, 10 cents for a dozen eggs and, potatoes. If you buy a sack for 25 cents, they'll last them, for a long time. But they manage, I suppose. They don't starve to death anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Some people did. I was just reading in Barry Broadfoot's book where some people did starve to death.
Yeah, and especially I remember my husband used to talking about, but I don't know, he was more politician man like I am, but I guess he was reading a paper and he says that someplace people dying in a prairie someplace, they find it in grass in his stomach, so they eat it. So he was mentioned lots of times, so he read it in the paper.
Did you receive mail very often from Mr. Yurik?
Oh yes, he write every week, There was mailbox, mailman we have here for me every day except Sunday, I think. Saturday.
How did the depression hit him?
Oh, he was working, there's money coming. It's not very much, I guess, but his income was maybe monthly about $75.
And out of that, he sent you
So,
about 15 or so
yeah,
a month.
something to keep him. He was batching, he was alone, and then he had to
And then out of that, you also had to pay off your farm.
farm payment and interest from the.
And how much was your interest on the farm?
6%. Can you imagine those days? That was really.
That was quite a bit during that
Yeah,
time.
well, that's it.
And you have a 20-acre farm?
20, yeah, yes.
And how much did you pay for it at that time?
That was 4,500. But anyway, if we was waiting a couple of years after, when we got it, we could get it maybe for half the price. But we just wasn't lucky to, we wasn't
Get it then.
get
You're
it
in a
that
hurry
time.
to buy it, I
Yes,
guess,
well, that's it.
And your payments, did you make them monthly or?
No, I think twice a year. Yeah, for every 6 months. Yeah.
And how much did you pay?
Well, I can't really remember. Maybe 200.
So it took quite a few years
Yeah,
to pay
well,
off
that's
the farm.
it. You live on, There's two living here. You have to live there and pay the rent because there was CPR house he live in, my husband.
Oh.
Yeah, and he had to pay rent. But of course, he took it off from his check.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So he was getting less than $75 a month then, with,
Well,
with the rent taken off.
Yes, well, there wasn't, those days there wasn't very big rent. $10. Can you imagine? These days what you get $10 for rent, but anyway, you have to be paid.
I understand that in 1942 you left your farm to go live in Nakusp with your husband, who was a section foreman at the time. What did all your children go with you?
No, just the two sons and my daughter went there for nurse training, in St. Paul Hospital to Vancouver.
And at the time, what happened to your farm?
Well, we leave it to a neighbor looking after. He was renting, using the land. It wasn't very much. House was getting old and barn was getting old. It was not very good shape anyway, so...
And he just used the land for his animals?
Yes, animals and hay too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so in 1971, approximately 30 years later, you returned to live on the same site as you had lived 30 years ago. And what were some of the big changes that you noticed?
Well, there sure was. I was so surprised that I can't recognize the place. Well, the first thing is the roads, there was gravel road, just one road, and now they have a freeway and a cloverleaf road, and a nice big buildings, new houses, big houses, not shack like they used to be.
Must have been quite a change to come back, eh?
Just I say, it's hardly even recognize it when I come back here. I live now in the same place that I used to be, but it's sure is different.
And I guess the economic wealth of the people has changed drastically.
Yes, well, it's not anymore. And all friends what I used to be 30 years ago, they're all younger. I guess they grow up and they move away in other places, and the old people, I guess they die out. So I lose my neighbor that I used to know them and used to visit me.
Have you enjoyed coming back to live on the farm again?
Well, one way I am, but another way, it's hard because it's hard to make the friends when you coming back. It was just like a new place again. So, and
did it bring back any memories to come back and live on the farm?
Oh yes, I do. I still looking around. I like the animals and I like a little bit of garden, but I can't do what I used to be 30 years ago. But it's a healthy place to live on in a farm.
So you enjoyed even though there was a depression from the years that you've been living on the farm, you did enjoy living on.
Oh yes, I like the work, and then that was children with me, and I was younger, and I enjoy it to be busy.
So you don't regret having lived through the depression?
No, because we won't suffer that. As I say, we have enough eat, and we have a place to live on. We have a not very fancy house, but we have our own house, own place to live on. So we was pretty lucky, I should say.
And that means a lot to have your own place.
Yes, well, that's it. Not some people was not unfortunate not to have their own place, and they don't know where the next meal come from or something like that. So we should be thankful for what we have, what we did.
Okay. I understand that your children did help with the chores, but you thought that school was much more important for them.
Well, I sure did, because I thought as always, when I have a hard life like that, so that children should have education, so they help quite a bit, but I was after them to finish their high school.
When you did order your gumboots or clothing from the stores, whereabouts did you order it from?
We get from Eaton's. There used to be big Cadillac sandals every year, so that's why we shopping around. We sit down on a table and write the order, and here 1 week later we got our order.
And I imagine that would be a very enjoyable time.
Yeah.